So, do playing violent video games make players aggressive? It is a question that has taxed researchers, psychologists, and regulators since the first console was plugged into a TV and the first shots were fired in a shoot-'em-up game. Several studies have found that video games do not contribute to these problems. Furthermore, several groups have argued that there are few in any scientifically proven studies to back up these claims, and that any video game industry has become an easy target for media to blame, many modern-day problems. And then there are people who believe that video game violence affects psychological desensitization in real-life violence. Until the recent resurgence in interest in video games in the past decade, research on the topic was minimal. There were few correlations found, and several had conflicting results. There were 3 studies which used self-report data. Unfortunately, these early studies were not much help in determining a relationship between aggressive and video games. These experiments helped to show that there was a relationship, but not that there was enough evidence to prove it strongly in either direction. With the resurgence of interest in violent video games in the past decade, it has changed. The resurgence has been due to a number of factors, but the greatest of which has been a large number of high school shootings that have been blamed on violence in the public media. There were over a dozen incidents of violence, most involving death, and have been blamed on violent video games between 1997 and 2003. These range from beating deaths to shooting sprees to sniper shootings, and were not limited to the United States. In response to concerns about video games, governments around the globe have enacted or attempted to enact legislation regulating, prohibiting, or outright banning video games. Similarly, support for video game and media regulation has been linked to moral panic. To that end, different video game content rating systems have been introduced across the globe. Considering the popularity of video games, much more research needs to be done on this issue. It was reported in 1987 that 100% of elementary school students and high school students had played video games at least once, and that was more than 15 years ago. This is an obvious indicator that video games has entered a mainstream media, and that more research needs to be done on the effects of video games on, everybody. The majority of research thus far has been on the negative effects of video games, mostly due to violence contained within. But the exact relationship is still undermined, so research must continue. However, there are also many who hypothesize that video games can be a positive effect on you, and believe that it is worth time and effort to explore these possibilities. The advancement of video game research in the past decade has greatly helped our understanding on its effects on development. Unfortunately though, as I have said, more research is still needed, and until more is proven, we need to stop treating video games like tools of motivating violence. Politicians need to stop using it as a scapegoat. The video game industry has grown to the proportions of the movie industry, and shows no signs of stopping. With each generation of games, more realistic games, more violence, bigger world, and more possibilities. In order to fully control the effect that it has on our children, we must first better understand the effect that it has on the personality and behaviors, and not just in the areas of aggression and hostility. As we reach this understanding, hopefully developers can create games which will help our youth expand their minds, and shy away from the current trend that is video game violence.